Welcome everyone, thanks for joining us for another episode of Live from Curious Smithsonian Science How. I'm Maggie Benson. We have a really awesome show for you today. With us is Dr. Anna Phillips, an invertebrate zoologist here at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History. Anna, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So Anna, you're an invertebrate zoologist, but you are studying parasites. What do you do as a parasitologist here at the Smithsonian?
A parasitologist is a scientist who studies parasites. So in my research, I look at parasite diversity, so the different kinds of species of parasites. I look at how different parasite species are related to each other, and then what host organisms parasites are associated with.
So let's take a step back, and actually, can you tell us what a parasite is?
Parasites are organisms that live on or inside a host organism. Parasitism is a type of symbiosis, and that's a relationship between two organisms when the parasite gains a benefit from being in the host, and the host has a negative effect from that relationship. So the parasite, in this case, is getting a home, it's getting nutrients from the host, whereas the host is losing some of its nutrients.
It doesn't sound like a great relationship for that host. I'm wondering why we should study parasites in the first place. I'm sure you have that answer, but don't tell us. Let's actually ask our viewers. Viewers, tell us why we should study parasites in the first place. Participate in a live poll with us now. You can respond using the window that appears to the right of your video screen. Should we study parasites because parasites are valuable as medicine, dangerous to humans, members of food chains, or members of ecosystems? Take a moment to think about it and put your answer in the window to the right. And remember that this is the same place where you can post questions for Dr. Anna Phillips to answer live on our show today, and for parasitologists Whitney and Jimmy, special guests in our chat, to respond to you. And we can see the results coming in, and people have selected all of the possible answers, but 55% as of right now think that the answer is dangerous to humans. What do you say?
Some parasites are dangerous to humans, but actually all of these answers are correct.
Trick question, huh? So you're studying parasites to learn about all of these things. But I mean, the one that strikes me as a little bit surprising is valuable as medicine. You just told me that parasites take nutrients from the host, so how are parasites valuable to medicine?
There's lots of things we can learn from parasites. So, for instance, parasites they're an exciting area of research where we can learn about how they interact with their host immune system. So some parasites may cause a little bit of an immune response. An example of a parasite that's been used in medicine are leeches, for instance. So in the 17 and 1800s, leeches were used as a cure-all. So everything from headaches to the common cold. And this is because people thought that things that made them sick were in their blood, so bad blood. And so they wanted to get rid of that blood. And
did leeches get rid of that blood for them?
Right. So many species of leeches feed on blood. And they were using those leeches. They would put them on and had them suck the blood off. And then once the leech is removed, that wound would continue to bleed. And today we use leeches in medicine. We know now that leeches have anticoagulants in their saliva, and that's what causes that wound to continue bleeding. And they are used in medicine today, but for a much more refined purpose, not as a cure-all. So they're used especially after surgery, when we had things like skin grafts, or if you have like a digit that's been cut off, like your finger, and they reattach it. They can attach a lot of those vessels that take blood into the finger, but it's more difficult to attach vessels that take the blood out. So what will happen after surgery is that the blood will rush into the finger and then it will start to swell. Leeches have tiny mouths, and so they fit very well on the tips of fingers and noses and ears. And so when you put the leech on, it starts to suck the extra blood out of the finger, and then those anticoagulants go into the finger and help the blood continue flowing.
And that continuation of the blood flow, I'm sure, actually promotes healing then.
Right.
Wow, that's incredible. I never knew of such an application. Now, I'm looking over your shoulder, and I do know what a leech looks like, and it looks like we have a live one here today. Can you show us?
We do. So this leech is from North America, and You can see
It's
that.
pretty big.
Yeah, this is one of our larger leeches.
So is this one of the leeches used in medicine?
This one actually isn't. So there's some leeches that don't feed on blood, and it feeds mainly on earthworms.
Oh, wow. So that's pretty interesting. Now, that big end I see, is that the part where it feeds on the earthworms or it may suck your blood if it's that type of leech?
Well, a lot of people think that this big end is the mouth part, but this is actually its tail. So leeches have a circular sucker on their tail that's only muscles, so they're not feeding from that end. This tiny end at the other end, that's where the mouth is.
Oh, so this right here that we're seeing on the screen, that's actually the sucker that allows it to adhere?
Right, that's the tail sucker. And so it's kind of like a suction cup that presses against glass.
Wow, so leeches are a little less scary to me now. So are there any other modern applications of parasites in the medical field?
Right. Parasites, this is a really exciting part of research in the sense that parasites, when they're in our bodies, a lot of the time they're sort of flying under the radar with our immune systems. And understanding the mechanisms, how parasites can be inside of us and our immune system doesn't fully react to it, it's really interesting. So there are some cases, like on the screen there's whipworm, where people are using worms as drug therapy, or as worm therapy really, for people with autoimmune diseases where their bodies are reacting against their own tissues. So things like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. If we give them things like whipworms and hookworms, it gives the body something to attack. And so the body will attack the worms rather than the person's own tissues.
Wow, that's so fascinating. And it actually gives me a deeper appreciation of parasites. I can't say that I came into this really loving the idea of parasites. I've always come to this thinking about parasites being really dangerous and really deadly. Is that true? Is that a natural aversion?
They can be harmful to humans. Most parasites, though, aren't going to be deadly. They may cause a little bit of a reaction or even none at all. This is because the parasite wants to have a long-term association with its host. And that helps provide it a home so it can become an adult and reproduce more.
So it's actually beneficial for that parasite not to kill the host.
Right.
But can it kill you?
It can't. There are some of the smallest parasites of humans can be some of the deadliest. So like on the screen, on the small circular light pink, those are red blood cells, and the dark pink are worms. These are Plasmodium species. This is the parasite that causes malaria. And so they're very tiny. They live in our blood.
So they can be deadly, but not always, and they actually have some beneficial uses.
In certain cases.
So I saw a fish there. I'm familiar with parasites parasitizing other animals. Can parasites live in or on anything that's living?
For the most part, all free-living organisms have some sort of parasite. So when we look outside, we think about there's things like crabs and squirrels and birds and fish. All of these free-living animals probably have some sort of parasite. Parasites are really diverse. Parasitism is a lifestyle, so it's not necessarily a related group of organisms that are parasites. It's more that there's many kinds of parasites that are parasitic. So parasites include things like intestinal worms, fleas, ticks, lice, blood parasites, single-celled organisms called protozoans.
Interesting. So you're mentioning a lot of different hosts, things that have parasites themselves. I mean, what is the diversity of hosts? What does that look like if they're, impacting all different animals across all different genera? I know specifically the tapeworm, bird tapeworms have multiple hosts. Can you explain what that cycle looks like?
So there are many species of tapeworms that will parasitize all vertebrates. And many parasites have what's called a complex life cycle. And so what this means is that through the parasite's life cycle, that metamorphoses between different shapes and different forms. So in this case on the screen, you see the bird, which has a tapeworm. It's shedding eggs into its feces. So as the feces pass out, the eggs go into the environment. The eggs then get eaten by what's called an intermediate host. So this is a host that the parasite is just developing and growing. And in this case, it's a copepod. And then that intermediate host gets eaten by possibly another intermediate host, and therefore the tapeworm passes into the next one. It metamorphoses again, and then eventually ends up in the adult bird. And in the bird as an adult, and then it reproduces to start the cycle over again.
So that's just one example of one type of tapeworm. And it depends on all of those different species to be able to reproduce and be successful. Does that mean that if an ecosystem changes, I mean, if there was a drought or if something major happened in that climate or ecosystem, that the parasite's life would be impacted?
Definitely. These life cycles, because they are complex and have so many different players in them, it means that there can be a bit fragile. So all these connections have to be made at the right times, the parasite getting into the different host species in the correct order. So if something changes, then the parasite might not make it to the next stage. So for instance, like when birds migrate, they're moving to a different location where those intermediate hosts may not be. So if something disrupts that, like climate change, for instance, which may make birds migrate at a different time, or they may go to a different area, that can disrupt that parasite's life cycle and it might not make it into the next stage.
Interesting. So we have a lot of student questions coming in. Thank you all for sending them. Keep them coming. We're going to get to some of them now.
Okay.
This one comes from Roberto from the Ocean Academy. What fruit can you find most parasites in? Which actually is an interesting question. Can you find parasites in plants?
Roberto, you're thinking outside the box a little bit from what I'm talking about, because I'm talking a little bit about animal parasites. So we get these from eating other animals, but there's a whole field about plant parasites. And so parasites can live on things like fruit. So this is one of the reasons you want to wash your fruit before you eat it or peel it.
Smart. So we have another question, but it comes in by video. So let's have a look.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Olu, and I'd like to know how many known species of parasites are there?
Great question. How many known species of parasites? I wonder if even scientists know that answer.
Olu has a very common question that we all want to know the answer to. It's hard to say, and it's hard to put a definitive number because there's so many parasites we haven't discovered yet. But the best estimates we can give is that of all the species on Earth, over 50% of them are, or over half of them are parasitic.
We have another question. This one comes from Karen from Bethesda. What's the largest parasite in the Smithsonian's collection?
Oh, wow. Karen, you're thinking big. So we have some very long tapeworms. And so some of the tapeworms can be 30, 40 feet in length.
Oh my goodness, that's
Yeah.
a big worm.
But they're sort of coiled up in
Terrifying.
Yeah. But they're sort of coiled up in jars. They end up being really big jars. So,
What kind of animal does a 30-foot tapeworm live in?
mammals.
Oh, wow. That's actually a great segue. We're going to talk a little bit more about the National Parasite Collection that is here at the Smithsonian, newly acquired, and a little bit about your research. But first, I think we should ask our viewers a question about why we would ever keep a collection of parasites to begin with. Viewers, here's an opportunity to participate in a live poll. Tell us, parasite collections are for keeping parasites safe, learning more about parasites, reproducing parasites, or killing harmful parasites. Put your answer in the window that appears to the right of your video screen. Anna, we can see the results, 78%, 86%, the bar is still moving, think that learning more about parasites would be a valuable reason to keep a collection. What do you think?
Definitely. We learn more about parasites from this collection every day. But actually keeping parasites safe is another thing we do with this collection.
You must have to keep them safe to be able to study them in the future, right?
Right.
What do you have here from the parasite collection? I see a wonderful array in front of us now to share with us.
Well, speaking of really big specimens, we have this jar here of tapeworms from a dolphin.
Wow.
The dolphin stranded in Maryland a few years ago. And when we were able to recover these tapeworms, and there's probably about 3 to 5 in this jar.
That's it? Only 3 to 5 worms?
Yeah.
Wow.
This is Diphyllobothrium latum. It's a fish tapeworm. So the dolphins got it from eating fish. And it's one of the longest tapeworms that we know. So these can easily get to be 35 feet in length.
Wow, that's incredible. So what's the value of having this dolphin tapeworm from just a few years ago and comparing it with the collections over time?
Well, we have specimens from dolphins, parasites from dolphins in our collection. But what's really, what the value of this is that you can look back and see which species of parasites have been found in dolphins in the past. And then you can also look at which dolphins have hosted which parasite species. So you can look back at specimens from 100 years ago, you can look at them from 50 years ago, and then you can look at what we're finding today and compare that across time.
So you mentioned that you can look back at specimens from 100 years ago. That's, I mean, our national parasite collection dates back to over 100 years old. How did that start?
It started in 1892, and it originally was housed at the USDA because parasites were considered pests in agriculture, so of our livestock. And there was a lot of research going on at USDA about how to prevent our livestock from being infected. But today, the parasite collection includes parasites of all kinds of things, including our livestock as well as people and our wildlife.
It's grown quite a bit since 1892. And
yes.
You showed me that last week. Let's show our viewers. Anna, thank you so much for having us here.
Sure.
There are jars everywhere. Where are we?
We are in the U.S. National Parasite Collection.
What can you show us today?
Let's go see. These worms are from a pig.
Oh my goodness, there are so many. And even the label in the jar looks so old. How old are these worms?
Well, this collection was founded in 1892, and it started because parasites are considered pests in agriculture. So parasites can infect animals that we eat, like pigs. We need to know how they can get these worms and how to prevent them from getting these worms.
So this is really important for keeping our animals or livestock healthy.
Right. These are tapeworms from a fox, and these are roundworms from a skunk. And this is the main value of this collection because it's important to know what parasites are in wildlife because those can be transmitted to our livestock and then also to humans.
And we're looking at so many jars here. How many parasites are in this collection?
There's several worms in this jar, but these are just some of the over 30 million specimens in this collection. And it keeps growing.
You told me there it's still growing, and you are one of the people who are adding to that collection as a scientist here at the Smithsonian. Do you go out and do field work to be able to collect more specimens to add to this collection?
We do. We're always, scientific collections are dynamic, and we're always accessioning new specimens. And we're always getting more specimens for the collection. Sometimes we do this by going into the field and collecting ourselves. So a few years ago, we went to Brazil and collected bird parasites. So we wanted to look at, we were around Sao Paulo, Brazil, in sort of the southern part of the country, and we were looking at all the different birds there to see what kind of parasites were associated with those species.
That's interesting. So how do you actually get the parasites out of the birds? How are you extracting those?
So we were working closely with ornithologists in the field, and we were looking at all aspects of the birds, so including their blood, and looking at blood parasites. But once we got the parasites, we took them back to the lab and we prepared them in a way for permanent mounts. So putting them on glass slides, we could look at them with a microscope, and then also taking DNA vouchers.
So how are you identifying those parasites? I can't imagine that a parasite this size is inside of a bird.
Right. Well, you'd be surprised at the size of some parasites in birds. We were looking at the structures of the tapeworms and also the other parasites to identify the species. And then we also would sequence the DNA using those DNA vouchers. And by sequencing the DNA, we can compare that between the different specimens we collected to learn more about how they're related to each other.
Interesting. And do you also use microscopes to be able to look at those features of those animals?
Yes. There's several kinds of microscopes we've used. The scanning electron microscope is what we use to create these images.
They're beautiful. It looks like art.
Yeah, they're pretty striking. So the scanning electron microscope looks at the exterior of the specimens, and we can see really tiny parasites really clearly.
So using SEM technology, scanning electron microscope technology, and DNA, and looking at the features of all of these parasites, what did you find in your Brazil work?
Some of the specimens that we collected in Brazil, we were able to, for instance, this tapeworm was a species that we redescribed, and was the first time that it's been found since 1908.
Oh, wow.
So from this trip, we were able to redescribe these 2 species, and we were also able to describe 2 new species that hadn't been known to science before.
So that's a brand new discovery of 2 new animal species.
Right.
Very cool, or parasite species rather. Very cool. So are there other scientists around the world who are working on these kinds of projects to better understand parasites in different ecosystems and animals?
There are. This was part of a larger project that was funded by the National Science Foundation. It took about 6 years. There were over 65 participants in 21 countries that came together, and we were looking at the diversity of parasites across vertebrate classes. So we had a team that were working on the tapeworms of mammals. We had a team that was working on the tapeworms of fish, and I was on Team Bird.
Oh, and this is what we see here. So it looks like birds and mammals have the market on tapeworm diversity, the most different kinds of tapeworms. Is that true?
Yeah, of tapeworm species, they do. But also there's a large part of the diversity in the sense that some of the oldest tapeworm lineages are found in sharks and rays and skates.
Oh, interesting. Why would that be? Is it because they've been on Earth longer than some of those bird species?
Well, the lineage of sharks, skates, and rays is a very old lineage in the tree of life. And so in geologic time, these animals came about much earlier than many others. And this makes sense that we have very old lineages of tapeworms and a very old lineage of vertebrates, especially when you think about the oceans being some of the oldest habitats we have on Earth.
This research that you're sharing with us here today, Anna, is really interesting work, and it's great to know that you and other scientists around the world are collaborating to learn more about parasites and ecosystems they're living in. We have a lot of student questions, and let's get to as many as we can.
Okay.
This one is from Ryan and Aiden. Can leeches be used to suck venom from a snake bite? That's a great thought.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that one before. So thank you, Ryan and Aiden. I have not heard about using leeches for that. They probably wouldn't do very well with it because they don't feed for very long. And they're trying to feed on the blood, and so I'm not sure they would be very efficient at pulling just the venom out. Yeah.
They might get sick too.
You probably need to see a doctor. Tell someone you've been bit by a snake if that happens.
Vicky from Chicago, do you have to take care of your parasite collection in any special way?
Ooh. Okay, so this is a great question about jobs, Vicky, because we have an entire team here in the Department of Invertebrate Zoology that specialize in collections management. So we have people who have special training to work with glass slides, specimens on slides, and specimens in jars and in fluids to make sure that the specimens don't dry out, to make sure that they're in the proper fluid. So,
how do you collect these parasites? It's a question, we don't have a name for it, but one of our students wants to know how they've been collected over time.
So there's a few different ways that you can get specimens of parasites. So one is to look at the blood. So you can take a little bit of blood and you can find parasites that way. Another is kind of like in our bird life cycle where the eggs are coming out in the feces. So you can actually collect feces and find poop. So you can find eggs and poop. And then another way is how we got the dolphin tapeworms is when there's animal, we do a necropsy. And so then we can actually get the adult parasites out when they're doing a necropsy to find out why the animal died.
That dolphin had died on shore and you were able to essentially do an autopsy on it.
Right, we wanted to know what had happened.
So we have another question from audio. Let's look.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Ami, and I was wondering if you could tell me which type of parasites were more effective, parasites that live symbiotically with their host, or parasites that kill off their host?
That was Owen with that question.
Owen?
Great question.
Okay, Owen. So we were just talking about how if a parasite gets into its host and it kills it too quickly, it decreases the amount of time it has to reproduce and create more parasites. So a lot of parasites will cause a small amount of immune response so that they can sort of fly under the radar and not cause the host to be too sick or to die. So most parasites don't want their host to die because it takes away their home.
Great. And Ami, I'm sorry I mispronounced your name. It was Ami. I fed you the wrong name. Okay. So this one is from Dominic. Do parasites live in bats?
Yes, there's lots of parasites in bats.
So this one's coming from the Curious Lab group, the folks that we have watching here from the Smithsonian with us. Is it common for humans to get tapeworms?
Hi, Curious Lab. Yes, it can be, but it depends on what you eat. So one of the ways that we get parasites is if you don't cook your meat properly. And so when humans we can get tapeworms from fish, we can get tapeworms from pigs and from cows, and a few other things, but it usually comes when we eat undercooked meat. So as long as you cook your meat well, you'll probably not get tapeworms.
Emily and Sophia ask, what is the most interesting parasite you have ever studied?
Oh, I have to think about this one. Thanks, Emily and Sophia.
Is it like picking your favorite child or your favorite pet?
There's so many. Yeah, it's difficult because, I mean, leeches have a special place in my heart, but then also I really like bird tapeworms. But I think there's different parts of each of those that I like. So I really like, the part about blood feeding with leeches, but then bird tapeworms, I really like birds too. So learning about the different parts of this biology and then comparing them is part of the most interesting part of my job.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot to learn about parasites, so you have plenty to choose from. So the Curious Lab group would like to know, what made you want to study parasites in the first place? Was this always a lifelong goal of yours?
Not exactly. I was not one of those 5-year-olds saying, I want to study parasites someday. But I did know when I was young that I like nature and I like learning about different animals. I like being outside. And as I progressed through school and I learned more about different kinds of animals, I learned about parasites and I became interested in that. And so there's a whole field of parasitology out there that can be applied in different ways. And even if you like, a lot of parasitologists also know a lot about host groups. So if you like a certain kind of animal, like birds, for instance, you can study the parasites of birds, for instance.
So this is from Watkins' 4th grade class. Thank you so much for joining us. What's the most harmful parasite for humans?
Very serious. So Watkins' 4th grade. Today, there's many parasites that can make people very sick, but not necessarily kill them. So these are things that cause diseases like onchocerciasis, filarial worms. Those make schistosomiasis. These are some of the most infective things for humans that can make them very sick. The most deadly parasite for humans today is malaria, or is Plasmodium that causes malaria. It kills over, I think, 400 million people a year.
Wow. So we have one last question before we wrap up, and this one is from Glenwood Academy asking what the oldest collection, or what the oldest specimen is in our collection.
Hi, Glenwood Academy. So the oldest specimen in our collection, it's a specimen from 1809, and it's from a sea turtle.
Wow, and that actually predates when the entire collection started.
It did. It did.
Very interesting. Anna, thank you so much for being here today and asking or taking all of our questions about parasites and teaching us a little bit about the National Parasite Collection, what you do here at the Smithsonian.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you all so much for sending in all of your wonderful questions. Check out the Curious website, curious.si.edu, to get teaching resources about this topic, to learn more about parasites, and to see the archive of this program, which will be available later this evening. Thank you so much for joining Science How, and we'll see you next time.